The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman.
Welcome back to another Mission Minded. Keep your mind, your mission, your mind. He is the CEO of the Heart of Alabama Food Bank. He does fantastic work. And of course, we're happy to have him here on TKR. You can hear the show at least 5 days a week where we get your favorite podcasts. We're available on every major indice out there to search Mission Minded with Michael Coleman or Tony Kurre Radio. And of course, you can also hear it right here on the TKR. As we do the show, Michael, first of all, I hope you're doing fantastic. Happy Friday to you. We're doing the show here on January 17th. I normally don't tell you when we're doing it, but just breaking a few minutes ago at issue, the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, a law passed by Congress last April with wide bipartisan support, has now been upheld by the Supreme Court. In passing the law, Congress cited concerns over the app's Chinese ownership. We're talking TikTok here, which members said meant the app had potential to be weaponized or used to amass vast amounts of user data. And you know what? The Supreme Court agreed and said, listen, you got till January 19th to either sell it or be done with it. I had a father-daughter moment last night that almost brought me to tears. My daughter loves TikTok, and I keep an eye on her social media. She's not allowed to post things. She can go watch things. As a 12-year-old, this is just who they're going after. I certainly understand it. So I'm not on social media nearly as much as I used to be, and I'm 59. I got screwed over so many times and getting hacked and stuff. And I said, you know what? Enough's enough. I got to figure out a different way to tell people to look at me. And I've got enough followers, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm just done. It's just not that important that I go post what I had for dinner last night. I just don't do it. Right. But I get it from a kid's standpoint. But she was in tears last night saying, please tell me they're not going to shut down this TikTok thing. And I said, certainly, honey, they're going to figure out something. You know, this is like a strike. You know, you got till Monday to figure it out. This is like the Gaza Strip. We're going to figure something out before Trump takes office. Something will break at the last minute, or the budget that seems like it's the can being kicked down the road in the government, you know, just before it's supposed to shut down. Something always happens. So I'm a little bit surprised this just happened. I'd love to get your thoughts on that and your thoughts on what it means for the government to protect our freedoms, because I know a lot of people aren't happy about that, including the 170 million users of TikTok in the United States.
Well, I'm not surprised that they upheld it, simply because that was a lot of the opinion. When they have the oral arguments, you kind of get a feeling based on the questions that the Supreme Court justices ask. You kind of get a feeling for at least where they're leaning to, or at least where their starting position is. But it really speaks, first of all, to the greatness of our country, and that we take something that values, and we each have our own set of values, and we have shared values, and then we look at issues and we have different issues. Now, those different issues, the way we look at this issue, and TikTok could be one, we could still have the same values, but look at how this issue affects those values, and we may then interpret that differently. Mm-hmm. It's totally normal. So somebody that you're normally in agreement with everything, you might be in total disagreement about this. Now, a young person like your daughter, of course, is going to look at this through very narrow lens. Like, I enjoy it. It's where I spend a lot of my time, and you're going to, and all of a sudden it's going to be gone. That's a childlike response. I mean, that we would think.
It's like having her teddy bear taken away. I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding
you. Thinking from a national security perspective. But what's so good, I was going back to what I was saying about what makes this, our country so great is that we do have a core set of principles and values found in our Constitution, the Bill of Rights. But sometimes things like freedom of speech, and then the responsibility to protect our country as a whole, those values clash. And that we get to present those ideas, and because we follow the rule of law, and when that's why Supreme Court doesn't have an army that doesn't have to go enforce the law, because we as a country, we adhere to the idea that once it's been decided, we're going to adhere to it, and with the rule of law. And so having said all that, I get that there's going to be people for different reasons who are going to oppose the Supreme Court's decision. And then there's going to be others that say, hey, I don't care if they have my information. And, and others say, no, I do. I won't. But it does lead to a bigger perspective, which I think is kind of what we're talking about is when is it okay for the government to come in and enforce these rules or create rules? Because one of the things that you'll see, it was a lot of what Trump talked about, again, whether you like it or whether you don't, is government regulation. So what happens is in the executive branch that oversees all the cabinets, all of a sudden you might have the EPA come along, and these are not elected. This is an appointed. You have an EPA director, and then you have staff, and they come along, and all of a sudden they establish a rule. Now, that's not been voted on by Congress. It's not a law, but it's an administrative rule, and they can fine you if you don't follow it and all that kind of stuff. And so we're like, these are unelected officials, and all of a sudden they're so intrusive in our life. That goes to what's happening in Los Angeles. So they talked about that one guy talked about that he was trying to change his garage door, and he had to get 3 different people come and inspect for his personal garage door to replace it because it wasn't working. Yep. He had to have 3 different government entities come and inspect, and that's the burden of government. And now so they're talking about it can take 3 to 4 years to get just a permit to build in Los Angeles. And now so much of it's wiped out due to the fires. How are they going? Is anybody ever going to be able to navigate that space? And even Governor Newsom coming in and saying, well, no, we're not going to let people come in and just buy property, because if I don't have the money to rebuild my home, but somebody's going to come and give me $1 million for that land that I own. Yeah, I want to do it, but government. But here's the governor saying, no, I'm not going to let people do it because that conflicts with his own personal values or whatever. So that's what I'm saying. You have government oftentimes that intrudes greatly into our lives, and we elect Trump lots of times, and people like that say, hey, I want to get government out of your life and that intrusiveness out of your life. So, but then you see here where Trump is for TikTok. He wants to do it, but the Republicans are the ones that was very bipartisan that created this law. And
by the way, it's my understanding he can do something when he takes office. He can push this off. So even though
it's just like anything else, because the legislative branch passes a law, but the enforcement of the law comes from the executive branch. Yeah. And it's just like there's a law, there's a national federal law that marijuana is illegal. And when Colorado, I think, got the whole ball rolling by saying, well, we're saying as a state it's not illegal, so we're going to pass a law saying it's legal. Well, the federal law always overrides the law, but the Attorney General's office made a decision that they're not going to enforce that federal law. It's still a law.
Sure.
They just said they're not going to follow it. So what Trump, I think, in the Attorney General's office would have the ability to do is to not enforce it or to say, okay, I'm going to extend more time for you to sell the company. So on that kind of thing, he can't just go and outright change the law. He can't say, nope, I'm going to ignore it.
And by the way, Florida just signed into law January 1st this year that if you're 15 or under, I think it's 15 or 14, you're not allowed to be on social media. Social media platforms 15 and under are not allowed in the state of Florida. And people are like, what? But again, how is that enforceable? How can you enforce that? So, I mean, there's a lot of things, and it's interesting because this reminds me a little bit of the parent with the 16-year-old girl who wants to go out with the bad boy. And I'm like, as your parent, you just need to listen to me. Our country's really, really young. We're a 2-year-old. We are, next to the Frances and the Europes and stuff. We are a 2-year-old, man. We are still going through growing pains. And sometimes we live in the greatest country in the world, with the most free country in the world, and a lot of responsibility comes with that. And as a parent, I know that some people are loving this. As a parent, it's like, good. I don't have to deal with this TikTok crap anymore. Now there's probably going to be red ribbon or whatever these other things are through ByteDance, so people are going to be hopping on board. It's not going to be the same thing. But I mean, as a parent, a lot of parents are like, good. It's going to help me. But yeah, it reminds me of saying, listen, you don't understand this right now, but I'm telling you, you're not allowed to go out with him, and you'll understand one day. And I hope that government looks at that way, whether it's Roe versus Wade, whether it's the 44-ounce big gulp, whether it's me having to ride a helmet when I ride my bicycle. That is something that when I was told I had to ride a helmet, it's the law. I was like, you got to be crazy. I have to ride a helmet when I'm riding my bicycle in my neighborhood. I can't feel the wind, so that we've got laws, seatbelt laws, everything else. But I think for the most part, when those laws are enacted, they do make it a better place to live.
I would say as a whole, and I will give you an example. I mean, it's so easy to be anti-government and anti-administrative, but or administrative regulated. But one of the things, and I've talked about this with the food bank work that I do, we went over and looked at a Tyson plant about 2 hours from here. We get donations from them. And I was blown away that they run 3 shifts. And so 2 8-hour shifts are they're processing chicken, everything from the kill plant to, just everything that's due to process. But every single day for 8 hours, that plant shuts down and all they do is steam clean, pressure wash, all that plant. And they are required, as all manufacturing companies are, I guess, of a certain size, especially with meat and proteins. Okay. I don't know if this is the same with vegetables and things, but if you're processing meat, it's slaughterhouse and everything else, you have to have a USDA inspector. And that USDA is on site that I think the company pays for, provides office space. So, I mean, that's their place. And that USDA representative has the authority to shut that plant down at any moment. Huh. It's not, I'm making a recommendation. I am shutting this down and stopping the entire process. Now, of course, he's got to know what he's doing. He can't use that power willy-nilly. But me, the wings that are processed at Buffalo Wild Wings, the boneless wings are made in that plant. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to Buffalo Wild Wings. I just take for granted that the food is safe to eat. I never have to worry about that. Now, if I go to Mexico, we all know it's real hit and miss. There's certain things you don't drink certain water. We take those things for granted. I'm going to go to Buffalo Wild Wings. I'm going to go watch sports, gather with some guys. We're going to cut up, have a great time, and we're going to have a bunch of boneless wings, and it's all going to be safe. Well, that's because of government interaction with business and enforcing standards. Now, the problem is that we tend to overregulate. It's not that so it's like what I've seen with some cities, and typically more progressive cities, is they go, okay, here's a standard of cleanliness in our water and whatever measurement unit they do. And so they come up and they pass it and they go, okay, every business, every public entity has to come up with this level of cleanliness. But then what happens is, then they come in and say, oh, well, no, we're gonna ratchet up and even have more clean water. It's not that this water is no longer clean, is that we can make it cleaner. And then their messaging becomes about, oh, well, if you don't want to spend the money and put all this administrative cost on businesses and government entities, if people oppose that, and look, we already have clean water. Could it be cleaner? Maybe, but is it really a public safety issue that we have to change this and cost companies hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars? And then the argument back is, oh, well, you're against clean water. You're for dirty water. Then you get into those squabbles back and forth, and the real issue is lost. So I agree that we need government agencies bringing in regulations and oversight. But I do believe that there's overreach in many instances of people that we don't elect who have power and use that power. Because even an EPA administrator who comes out, an inspector, let's say, can look at, let's say, an oil spill, and it's completely up to him to go, okay, I'm going to give you 30, I'm going to be back in 30 days. I'm going to clean that up.
Mm-hmm.
Or just say, no, I'm going to go ahead and fine you. So a lot of it's just based on whether they were in a good mood or not, and those kind of controls. So it's all about what your tolerance level is. But I love the idea. So social media is kind of new, and a lot of parents are like, I try to keep my kid off social media. And there are people who go, well, you should be checking your kid. I mean, there are people who say, I have several friends say, I have all my kids' logins. I can check it anytime I want to. But the reality is, how often do we actually check it? They can still do things on Snapchat and get away with it. They can still do it they can have an app up for a week and then delete it. Mm-hmm. There's just ways around it. So the idea that, hey, there's some oversight, I don't think is a bad idea, especially when it comes to from a world affair position that I don't think we truly appreciate how much China is our next greatest threat.
No doubt. No,
and they've been stealing technology from us for years, and now they're getting data. And what they will do that to hurt the American public, I think it's right in this case, and just my personal opinion, that the government step in and say, no, we'll still have TikTok, but it's not going to be controlled by anybody.
This is Mission Minded. Keep your mind, your mission, your mind. He's the CEO of the Heart of Alabama Food Bank. We talk about businesses and all kinds of stuff. The TikTok Supreme Court just came down about a half an hour ago as we do the show here on the 17th. They upheld the TikTok ban, which means there could be no TikTok on the 19th. I'm betting there's going to be TikTok somehow on the 19th. It's just too difficult to sell to one individual. And I know the whole Elon Musk buying it was a joke. But one of the things that I look at, I'm 59 years old. I know you're up there in age. I'm not going to tell people how old you are. I know I've been around a long time. Yeah. And there takes two things in life to make it this far and still be on your feet, and that is responsibility and discipline. Obedience goes a long way in that too. It's a Bible thing. There's a lot of reasons why. Someone the other said, "Why do you say the rosary? You say the same thing over and over." It's an obedience. It's an obedience type of thing, and they don't understand how strong and stringent obedience is in the Bible. So I'm going to go back for that just a little bit, but I look at what is the hot topic and who's being affected by this particular ban. And the majority of it is teenagers. It's youngsters. It's people's brains who have not been formed. They have not been turned. They have not been. And so as a parent, I'd like to think I like to think that parents do have their passwords and look at their stuff, but I know they're not. They're not. Right. And I wish I could do more as a parent. I wish I could do better things. We didn't have TikTok and all this stuff when we were growing up. Oh, to be told I had to wear a helmet when I was 14 was enough. And watching television, all we had to do is make sure that they weren't watching HBO at midnight because there was going to be boobs on television after midnight if you got the new cable box, right? Right. And now with the internet,
that's what led me to being a night owl.
I did too. I got up and go to the bathroom every night at 12:30 to watch Sex Files. No, so as a parent, I'm kind of like I'm glad it's happening, but I look at vaping. I look at gambling, gambling in this, and I listen, I don't want to be that old man on the front porch. I don't. We're going to have a major issue with gambling here in about 3 or 4 years in this year because everything started off as a fun bracket style fantasy football. You losers out there who are in your 50s that have your fantasy nights, you got issues. I'm sorry, you do. If you're in college, you're in your teen years and you got a fantasy football league, I get it. I'm fine. But if you're not just diehard gambling and you're a 59-year-old and you sit at Buffalo Wild Wings with your group of 12 guys doing your mock draft, you got issues. I'm sorry. You got some serious issues, man. Just go ahead and gamble because that's what you're doing. At this point, you're paying to see if you can get a return, whether it's a trophy or cash. And now all of a sudden, all those applications have turned into gambling apps.
Well, think about FanDuel. So in Alabama, you can't get on a gambling site because it's outlawed in the state because gambling's not allowed.
That's right.
So you can't even do it on a national level because the state has decided that it's illegal. So if you're in Alabama, you download the app. But as soon as they detect what your location is, or what your address is or credit card or whatever, that you're right. Which goes back to what's so interesting is people who object to government control. It really all comes down to what your issues are. So you may be in Alabama. Most people are for free operation. They don't want the government involved. But then you go, well, wait a minute. The government outlawed it and won't let me gamble. So when it comes to morality or what's perceived as moral issues, lots of times you'll see people, I do want government to enforce it. Mm-hmm. So we tend to want government to get involved to help us fight our issues. And that's just human nature. I will tell you something that popped in my head. I encourage people to go in and look at I saw some 80s clips. Actually, it may even been late 70s when they were passing a national seatbelt law or state seatbelt law. And so there were two people. One is a young mother, and she's talking about mandatory seatbelts. And then another one is a guy who is fussing about that. He said, I can't believe that it's about an open container law. I can't believe what's this country coming to when you can't down one or two on the cold ones on the way home from work, right? Because that was what you did back in the day. And then it goes to this young woman. She's like, yeah, you can't. You gotta wear seatbelts everywhere you go. For long, we're just going to be a communist country. I mean, they went from mandatory seatbelts to the next statement is we're practically a communist country. Yep. And if you look at the regulation there, that was so much less than what you see today. It probably would feel like to those people if they saw where we were today, it was a communist country. But again, it all depends on what you look at in terms of regulation, because there's regulation that we favor and regulation that we don't. But everybody doesn't favor and dislike the same thing.
Yep, you're right.
So we're part of the problem. We're very fickle.
We are a big part of the problem, and we saw a lot of that in COVID. Whether you don't think a vaccine was good or whether you liked it or didn't. We did not like being told we had to be 6 feet apart. We hated being told that our favorite restaurant was closed down. We hated that, we weren't allowed to do, well, the hell, I'm going to have me a party if I want to have a party. Well, guess what? You got to do what's best for this, not only for the people around you, but also for this country. And I think that goes into play too, is are we protecting just ourselves or are we protecting the people around us too? Because by me being on TikTok, it's helping TikTok. And by helping TikTok, it's helping its users to actually be looked at and surveilled. So I'm not helping anything. It's kind of like someone saying, well, I want to go buy my drugs every Friday night. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just, the guy down the street, he's not a militant. He's not buying. Well, let me tell you something. You go up that line of chain where that money goes, you're probably funding terrorism. I mean, I know that's saying, what are we going to be, a communist thing? But if you're buying drugs from the guy down the street every Friday, I just want to get a break away. I just want to get away from a little bit. I'm sitting by myself in my room watching my NFL and my underwear doing my drugs. What's the big deal? That money's got to go somewhere, and eventually it goes all the way up the chain. And next thing you know, I don't want to be that.
Saying. It's very. I know libertarian policy, political views tend to be probably the most consistent on this issue, because I know libertarians that for years, they're typically lean conservative, a little bit more Republican leaning, but they've been for free legalization of drugs for decades, because what they're saying is, I don't want government to intervene in very little of my life. And it includes I don't want the government protecting me from drugs and access to all those kind of things. So they're a little bit more consistent, but even then it runs into, depending on who you're talking to, it runs into some point where they become reliant upon government, whether it's administrative wise. And again, it's easy to say, I don't want so much government. Going back to my USDA example, they say, I don't want a USDA official being able to shut down a plant. But then we see what happens when Listeria gets out or Salmonella gets out and then infects people, all over. Going back, you remember there's Tylenol scares going all the way back to the early 80s where it turns out somebody had poisoned a bottle. But if you think about it, if you had somebody consider terroristic attacks getting in a manufacturing plant and mixing cyanide or things in that, if we didn't have the kind of controls, like when you open up a bottle,
oh my God,
that whole plastic, that whole little foil over it is all because somebody opened up a bottle and put cyanide, took 2 Tylenol and put that cyanide in. So now every industry does that.
Now they open a can of orange juice. And I opened a can of orange juice last night. I wanted orange juice. And I was like, you know what? I'll just wait till the morning. I mean, I had to take the top off. There had to be a spring thing around there. And then there had to be, and then of course, the thing on the top never rips off perfectly. So you had to take a knife and you have a stab. Yeah. I mean, I certainly get that.
But it's all because of fear of people tampering. But that became a regulatory kind of thing. You look at the car industry. They have put all these requirements to bring up fuel use, not fuel usage, but to stretch out the miles per gallon, to increase miles per gallon. And then we went through this period when, back in the 70s, Jimmy Carter just recently passed away, and he was back during where there was OPEC controlled all the world sources, and it was crazy, and we couldn't get fuel. And so then the government steps in and goes, okay, make all cars smaller, raise make them lighter, make them smaller. Well, lots of times they became less safe initially. I know they took years to work through that. And people are like, no, I need big cars. I have a big family. Small cars are not the answer to everything to save the planet. So you've kind of seen that swing. So government then focuses on that, and then there's pushback from the public gets enough, and then we get all SUV crazy, and then they come in and they go, okay, it's all about EVs. We saw that back in 2020, and now everybody's saying EVs are not the answer.
Yeah.
I saw 20% of our sales last year were EV or hybrids, but a lot of companies that declared we're only going to be doing EVs by a certain point by 2030 or 2035. And now they're already going back saying, wait a minute, because the momentum's not going that way because of all the minerals that have to be dug up and taken from the earth. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, where we have these pendulum swings and cries for the government to get involved, and then now it's too much, push back. So who knows how this will play out?
Yeah, I'm betting when we do our show next week that TikTok is still up in some capacity. And I'll leave us on this note, and you can certainly add something here. We still live in a free country. You can still say whatever you want. It just means there's going to be ramifications for it. People are like, I can't say this. Well, this is my first. You can say whatever you want. You can get online and say whatever you want. Someone may cut it down. Someone may throw you off. By the way, I had a friend of mine that I was talking with the other night, and I don't know why he told me about it, but maybe it's because we were just talking guy things. But evidently, you can't get Pornhub in the state of Alabama anymore. I haven't been on Pornhub. I don't know about it, but it's the number one porn site in the world by far. And evidently, if you pull up Pornhub, there's something on there. I'm not getting there because I don't want to have.
No, I've been told the same thing.
You can't get on Pornhub. I'm like, wait a minute, I can't watch my own porn now. You're telling me I can't even watch porn? I'm like, that's right.
Because the government said you have to come up, and the same thing TikTok. I mean, these companies that are putting these age restrictions, they're having to come up with some type of way to validate and verify. And of course, that's cost to the company.
Yeah.
There's this new software, so people have to manage that, all that kind of stuff. Well, so the company then has to make a decision. And I think Pornhub put out a statement that said, we're just making a decision. We're not going to do it. Yeah. And, so
we'll see what happens.
Again, so that may be where some of the other software, some of the other social media softwares may make similar decisions.
The other thing I think is interesting, and it's a biblical thing too, and then we'll let it fly. We got Bite by Bite coming up here next. Just be careful whenever it comes down to the mighty dollar. The dollar is super important. And I remember when Northport, Alabama decided to start having Sunday sales on alcohol. And Tuscaloosa, of course, I don't know if people don't even remember this, young fans probably, you couldn't drink at football games. You couldn't drink at football games. You couldn't drink at the Talladega Super Speedway. You could bring your own in, but they didn't sell beer at the Talladega Super Speedway until about 12 or 13 years ago. You could not buy alcohol on Sundays, period. And so when they saw that, Tuscaloosa all of a sudden said, well, Everyone's going to be going to Northport and buying beer on Sundays. We better go ahead and let this thing go. So next thing you know, they allowed alcohol sales. Next thing
initially,
you know,
it was about moral issues.
it was all about moral issues. It was all about moral issues.
Revenue, and they jumped
and
all
doggone
over
it. I mean, and it's all about, well, we can let these tax dollars go. What about gambling? We got $300 million a year going to Georgia to play the lottery. Why don't we have that money here? So you just got to be careful when it comes down to all about the mighty dollar, what we're willing to put our souls on the line for and sell, just because we need to make more money. Just be careful, because usually when you make that call, it's not a good call. Great stuff. Mission Minded. You can check our show out 5 days a week on the Tony Kurre Radio app. We do fantastic. And of course, wherever you get your favorite podcast, we're available anywhere. Mission Minded with Michael Coleman, Heart of Alabama Food Bank. Coming up right after this on our network of radio stations, we have a Bite by Bite, which is a great show specific to the Heart of Alabama Food Bank and Feeding America. We'll get into that next. Michael, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Enjoyed it, my friend.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.